Okay, per request, we're going to see how this works. So what I'm doing now is I am trying to take the beads off the edges of the bra strap. This is the band that goes around the back of the bra. You can see the cups here, the band comes around, and I'm taking the beads off. Why, you may ask? Well, I'm going to be adding some length to this, and I need to have free room to sew. Plus, there was some edge beading along both ends of the bra that would look very funny if I just continued the bra after that. Somebody who was trained and knew what to look for would say, hey, they just tacked on another piece of fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the beads off. This will let us study the stitch pattern so that I can recreate it a little bit easier later on. It'll also teach you something very important about mass-produced Egyptian costumes, which, while they are awesome, they don't knot, ever. They do not believe in knotting the thread because knotting, quite frankly, takes time. And if you don't have to knot, then you don't have to take the time to knot. And it's great for them, but it works out pretty badly for us because what that means is if you break one of these threads, you're probably going to wind up losing a whole bunch of beads. So I'm starting with the edge beading, and what I've done is I've just cut the thread a little bit. I'm intentionally leaving the thread as long as possible so that I can tie a knot properly to secure the threads later on, so that when I extend the beading line, I know that the thread underneath it has been knotted. Another thing to learn as you do this is you'll notice occasionally you see other threads sticking through with it. When they run out of thread, they don't stop, tie a knot, and then start a new piece of thread. They just set the thread next to the old thread and then keep sewing. It's one more trick that they use to save time. And again, it's one of the things that makes it a little bit more interesting, and just why you tend to see a whole bunch of threads just sticking out of costumes. The way this edge stitching is done is it's a pattern of, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 beads, and they'll stitch one stitch like this. They'll come out, they'll put the stitch in, and then put the needle back this way to bring the other stitch out. So it winds up coming, if you can follow along here, hopefully this shows up on the camera. You stitch, you come back, you stitch, you come back, you stitch, you come back, you stitch, you come back. And each time you put 7 beads on there. And that's the other reason why they don't have to bead, is that the stitches are very tight in the thread, or in the fabric, and as a result, they do not have to worry about it coming loose, because it kind of doubles back on itself. It puts a little bit of tension on there to make it a little bit easier. However, every time you start to get in and out of your costume really, really quickly, remind yourself, ooh, maybe I should treat this a little more gently because there's no knots anywhere in your costume. All right, I've taken this as far back as I want. So now I'm just going to tie my little knot. This is my little cheater's knot. It's not the best knot or the strongest knot, but remember, there's no knots anywhere in this costume, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to try and bring my loop down as close to the fabric as I can. Catch it under my fingernail and pull. Do the same thing. Normally I would lick my fingers and lick the thread, but this thread is no longer white. It is an interesting shade of gray that matches the costume. It has dancer patina. It has love from all the previous dancers who have worn this costume and sweated in it. And it has what my instructor Scheherazade, owner of Scheherazade Imports, would call Cairo dust. So it's got genuine Egyptian schmutz. I don't want to eat the genuine Egyptian schmutz. Just trim that. This other piece of loose thread, there may be a knot. There was a knot. Look, actual evidence of a knot. Happens so rarely. Now let's start to pull out the other side. Oh, there is a knot. Okay, so there might be 10 knots on your costume. There's just a few. Let's trim that off. Fish it out of the seed bowl. And just, you'll notice I'm working over a tray. That's to catch any loose beads. I'm also working over a little container cup thing to help catch more beads. I'm struggling with this one because it doesn't want to let go. There's another knot there. Not sure why. So this is the one you need your curved nippers. Curved nippers are the best little scissors. Dawn Devine taught me about these when she wrote a really nice article on the types of scissors you should have as a costumer, because it allows you to scoop up and under beads to cut them and not cut the fabric, or cut the thread and not cut the fabric. Very useful in circumstances like this. And again, you'll notice that the way that this stitch is the same way it was on the other side. When the thread comes out, they put the 7 beads on, they go back, 2 beads, 3 beads, come back out, go over again, come back, 2 or 3 beads. And as long as you come back the same number of beads each time and you keep your stitches about the same length, it'll look even. The hardest part in doing costume work like this, where I'm going to have to match what other people did, is getting my stitch tension the same way as theirs. And if you really study some of these mass-produced costumes, you will eventually learn that different people sewed the different parts of the costumes, because the bead stitch tension is not always the same. This is the part that I was worried that would be boring, which is me pulling on fabric. When it gets to be too much, there's probably a knot. Oh, look, a knot. Curved nippers come out. Very carefully snip just the thread. Catch the beads in the bowl. Doesn't want to come out the other side. We'll worry about that later. Gosh, I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to keep my hands where you can see the work. But there's just no good place to put this tripod on my workbench. And that's about good enough. I'm going to take it back one more just so I've got a little more room to knot. Lost a bead. This is why I work on a tray. And then the knotting. There are lots of ways to do knots. Find yourself a good sailor. Ask about different knotting techniques. Find a good Girl Scout. Ask them about knotting techniques. And then mainly find one that works for you. In this case, again, there's a fair amount of stitch tension in the fabric. So I know that it doesn't have to be perfect. When I'm personally beading and knotting, or beading my costumes, when I knot, I tend to knot about every inch or so. My thought is that that's about the amount of beads I'm willing to lose on stage and not be able to come back and get later on. That's how I do my math. I ask myself, how many beads am I willing to lose? How many inches worth of beads? In my case, it's about 1 inch worth of beads is all I'm willing to tolerate losing. And if I imagine myself up on that big stage with 100 other dancers that are going to be performing in the world's never-ending hafla, I know I'm never going to be able to come back and find those beads again. So how much am I willing to lose? I'm willing to lose 1 inch. Because normally I can repair 1 inch of beads some way. All right, now it's time to go after the sequins. And this is where I really need to pay attention, because this stitch is something that I've already tried to recreate up in the front here. And I didn't do it perfectly. It's not quite the same as everywhere else. But this area is very covered, so it doesn't matter. I need to study how they did the stitching. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge, because these sequins are a little bit wonked up. This is where the bra closed. It actually closed with a hook on this side, and then hooked over here. And you'll notice that there's been a lot of thumbs pressing on this over the years. That's okay. That happens with costumes, but it makes it a little bit harder to figure out how the sequins lay. What I can tell is it's a simple pattern of one sequin, the thread coming up through the fabric, through one sequin, through 3 beads, and down through the next sequin. And then it looks like it scoots under the fabric and comes up and over. But let's try and prove that. So we're going to reverse engineer our stitch by cutting it out. Again, using our curved nippers and sending a sequin across the room. I told you this is why I don't film these things. And then I knock the camera over because I forget that it's on the tray. Ow. Practical dancer cam down. Alright. Yes, you can see that they went through the stitch and then they went over about half a sequin, or about a sequin's width. And they did another sequin. Yep. So where the sequins overlap, they go down, they come up the length of one sequin, and they come up again the other. So that will cause the sequins to lie so that they very faintly overlap. And they've done 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of stitches here. You'll notice that they're gradually decreasing down. By the time we get to here, we've got about 3 rows of sequins that I need to recreate. I'm just going to bring this back far enough Nipper time. Just bring it back far enough that I can add on. And carefully knot. Notice how fast it comes undone. It takes us so long to be able to actually attach these things, and then it comes off just like that. How is that for heartbreaking? It will make you respect what people do. Daggum, I got sequins everywhere. It'll make you respect what people do when they do costumes for a living. It'll make you understand why some of the good costumers actually charge a decent amount of money. Yes, you can do this yourself. Yes, it takes time. Time is money. And you get the idea. I'm going to continue until both edges of the bra are back about 2 or 3 inches so that I've got some room to extend. And now I'm going to turn the camera off so I can actually find all the sequins I lost and get back to sewing.